Hello and welcome everyone to The Difference Makers. Today's program is Discover the Magic Behind Your Astrology Chart. Imagine stepping into the world of an acclaimed astrologer. What would it be like to study the planets and stars and better understand ourselves? How do these patterns reflect the timing that we need to know in our personal and business lives? And even more importantly, how do we put ourselves in rhythm with these cycles? Well, today you're going to get the answer. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest for today. Her name is Ysanne Lewis, and she has an amazing background. She's an acclaimed astrologer for over 40 years, and she's coming to us from Guilford, England. Let me give you some of her background. She's a public speaker and an award-winning author of the book, The Time Catcher. She's known as the timing expert, helping individuals, families, business owners choose the exact perfect timing for change, startups, and decision-making. And beyond that, she seamlessly weaves the cycles of the planets into our lives and enjoys making a complex subject accessible to the everyday person. In fact, she did my chart and I found it really fascinating. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Ysanne Lewis. Ysanne, thank you for being here.
Lynn, hello. Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. It is very exciting. Thank you.
I don't think most people have a chance to really get to talk to and know an astrologer. They probably just hire one if they're curious. So let's start out with you just telling us a little bit of your story, how you got to where you are right now.
Oh, the story of my life, Lynn. Well, I go back to when I was about 3.5 years of age, and I was a very shy, quite an odd child, and I didn't talk. I could talk, but I didn't want to. And then one day, my parents took me to my maternal grandmother, a wise woman who originally was from Wales, and she sat me at the piano, played tunes, and I ended up singing. Before I could talk, I found my voice. Then with schooling, I had quite a bit of bullying because I think I was a little bit different, certainly shy, a target for bullying. And I escaped, not unusual, I know, into books. I loved mythology, I loved folklore and novels, of course, anything to move into other worlds. I also loved the canopy of the heavens, the stars. And I looked at maps of them and maps in the countryside, as above, so below. And then at 14, I asked life, must have been a precious child. I asked life for a purpose. I just wanted a purpose. No clauses written into it. And then kind of let that thought go. I went on to do drama. I was on the stage doing festival competitions of singing, music, drama, which gave me the confidence to use my voice. That stood in good stead for later on. And then in my 20s, I did mainstream jobs, never very satisfied with them. And for 3 years, I studied metaphysics and astrology. It's a big, complex subject. I learned all the mathematics of astrology before there were computers to do that. And then at 27, which is an important age astrologically for all of us, I went to Arizona, and the wide open spaces and heights there filled my soul. I came back to England and impulsively gave my notice in at work, and I became self-employed as an astrologer. So 41 years on, I had no idea back in 1979 that those 41 years on would see me being an astrologer, public speaker, writer, and timing advisor.
Wow, well, it's really quite an interesting story, especially the fact that you went from being, going from bullying into opening yourself up to the world, really, to the planets, and then being able to help others. So let's start with first understanding what astrology is all about, because I think most of us think of astrology as you look in a magazine or a newspaper and you look for your birth date, birth month, and you get some general reading. But tell us in a little more detail, what is astrology all about?
Well, the word astrology, Lynn, means the language of the stars, astrologos. Going back to when people first walked the earth, certainly the first real horoscopes were calculated about 5000 BC.
Wow.
Accurately as well. I know they knew a thing or two back in Babylonian, Sumerian, Macedonian times. And it has developed and developed and has never gone away. Some astrologers laughingly call it the second oldest profession in the world.
That's cute. So tell us, why are your astrology readings different than the types of readings people would get in a general magazine? Because I know you go into great detail, you did with me, as far as finding the birth date and the timing, the place. What is your, why is this different?
Yeah, it's like a sat nav or GPS, you know, you're clocking in the coordinates of that moment. And a moment in time holds a memory. And that moment we are born is a very magical moment for all of us. It's a starting point. And the same would apply to your own business, to a project, to a workshop, anything. There's a starting point. And the difference between sun sign columns in the magazines and newspapers is huge. All of us know the month we're born in. We don't know where the planets are, though. That's the mathematical part of it. So we work with the time of birth, longitude, latitude, place of birth, and the full date of birth. And you've got, amazingly, 2,500 variables in one moment in time with all the planets and angles. Wow. And the astrologer's the astrologer's job is to synthesize the whole thing.
So how do you possibly, could you give us an idea of what's involved in your work? You said that number 2,000, can you repeat that again? How many elements are at work?
Yeah, I'm told there's 2,500 aspects within a birth chart of that moment in time, what all the planets, constellations, asteroids, fixed stars, everything is doing.
So what do you do then? How do you calculate what a person's timing is all about? How do you do that?
What their timing is about.
Yeah, or even what you, first of all, how do you calculate what you do when there are all these different elements working together?
Right. Well, nowadays I use a computer program, but for the first 15 years, in 1979 onwards, I did all the calculations by hand. There's a book called An Ephemeris, where you can see all the degrees and minutes of the planets on that day of birth, sidereal time, star time, the time of birth, and there's a lot of logarithms involved. And you end up with a map of a chart where all the planets are, the signs of the zodiac they're in, and their angles to one another. And also something called the rising sign based on your moment of birth, the zodiac sign and degree coming up over the horizon when you're born, which is what you look like, how you come over to people. It's like your persona, your mask to the world. And unless you're born at dawn, when the sun sign and the rising sign would be the same, they're very different. So how you appear to people can be different to what you're really like at core level. So
wow.
Yes,
wow, this is so fascinating. So, and it's the moon too, isn't it? You're studying the sun, the moon, and all the planets, right?
Well, they all have a length of cycles. The sun takes a year to go through the signs of the zodiac. We know that. It's all linked with the nature seasons as well. Each season has 3 signs in each of them, the seasons. So spring is Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Summer is Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and so on. The moon changes sign every 2.5 days of the month. That needs calculating mathematically. And the moon sign is very much about your first 7 years of life, your link with your mother, your own mothering side, the matriarchal line of the family, how you like your habits, your comfort zones, your house, where you feel comfortable. Yes. So, yeah, very important.
So what would people need to know if they were to work with you? I mean, how do you help them with timing? Because I think that's very interesting. I had never known that before I met you. I just thought, you know, that I could get some kind of general overview about what's going on in my life, but how does timing play into what you do?
Yes. Well, I think everything is about timing. Everything is about timing. And I think astrology is the queen or king of timing in a way. I mentioned a few minutes ago about the starting point of anything, a birth, when you're born, when you come out of the womb. The moment you register a website, you start an event, everything has a starting point and it needs to be flowing. And I work quite often with businesses, people who want to pick a good timing for a startup, for a webinar, for new branding, for running an event. And I look at where the planets are at that moment and date and see, are they in keeping with the business itself? Are they a high energy? Is it a low energy? Is it what I call an empty energy? What are the signatures like? And I choose a time. for that. Now, in our personal lives, timing also plays a part. We are, our bodies anyway, part of nature. Our souls are from elsewhere, but our bodies are from nature. And nature, the word means to be born, and cycles are set into motion at that moment of birth. And our inner timekeepers really do know our timing of change. But I'm sure you'll agree with me, Lynn, that the outside world interferes so very much with our own rhythm and timing.
You know, I thought it was interesting because when we worked together, you had asked me about the timing of my business start.
Yes.
So I would think most people don't realize that there's timing involved both personal and business, and they can be different. So I would like you to give us a little bit of information. You've done some really interesting insights here on timing for people and business. In your book, which we personally didn't talk about much because you were sharing your information for my timing, what insights do you give in your book that people would probably want to know? Can you give us a little like snapshot about that?
Yes, well, it's called The Time Catcher, and I've written it for the everyday person. If there's things that you don't know, you can find out more. But most of it you think, oh, yes, I'd forgotten I knew that. And I'm linking a lot with cycles in nature, in the body, with music, with the planets, of course, and a little bit with mythology and the stories of old, which are showing up in our day-to-day lives now. And I get people to look particularly at the moon cycles and giving them exercises, visualizations to help them to be in alignment with themselves and with life. Because I think loneliness, which is a big thing, particularly at the moment with the pandemic, loneliness is really the mismatch between yourself and people, places, jobs. And we go along routes and we don't realize that perhaps we're not exactly on the wrong track, but we could find more alignment with our inner purpose.
Wow, that's fascinating. So when you say alignment, I would think that would also mean being in tune with the cycles of the planets. Can you talk a little bit more about how do we get in tune? How do we know, other than when we know we're out of tune, when we're depressed or not feeling good, how do we get back in tune?
Yes, well, of course, in times gone by, people lived much closer to their bodily rhythms with nature to survive on Earth in the early days, if you like. People worked with the seasons and nature, and the first horoscopes were calculated for cooperation with nature, the solstices, the equinoxes, and many things. So our chart, our birth chart, is ourself. That moment we're born, that imprint is within us. Those cycles are set into motion on an hourly or daily, sometimes monthly. And some of these cycles last many years, you know, and we actually do know, but we get ourselves so busy, we forget to pause and reflect, that we get out of touch. We get out of touch, out of kilter with these cycles and rhythms within us, which we're born with. We're born with these. I always say to my client, I've probably said that to you, Lynn, that there's nothing I can really tell you in a chart reading because it is you. Having said that, from the moment we're conceived, we're so influenced by the outside world and doubt, and schooling does a lot of that as well. So it's like actors in a stage set, you know, the actors who get stage fright, they're scared to come on, you know, and we're so brought up to be good at what we're told we're good at and to forget the things that we're seemingly not very good at. And it's a shame because sometimes those wounded parts of us are very talented, but we sublimate them, we push them off stage.
Wow, that's fascinating. And to think that, so is there some way that when people work with you that you can let them know what cycle they're in? Tell us what it would be like to experience a reading with you. What do you want people to do and to prepare or to know? And how are you different, perhaps, than someone else?
Well, only from what other people tell me, and I do know that longevity, having done it 40 years, makes a difference. I've learned to simplify how I work with people. I engage much more. I'm certainly not going by the books. I'm more interested in them than what I can try and convince them of or prove through the birth chart. Because people come for different reasons, Lynn. Sometimes they really need counselling, and I've got a background in that as well, so that does help. Sometimes they're just curious, or they've been given it as a present. More often than not, they've come at a crisis point or crossroad. which will get mirrored, and I like that word mirrored, in the birth chart. And I help them to look at their different options, to bring from within them, to bring from within the client what they already know. So I'm not putting words into their mouth or into their head. And the journey we go on in a reading, which can last for an hour and a half, is very much one of exploration. And I am intuitive, but I'm using the timing, which is quite left brain, of the right timings for pausing, for starting. It's like a contract, you know, you can renegotiate, you can stop it, you can start a new one. So these cycles are important. And I take people on the journey of their ancestry, if people are open to the idea of past lifetimes and how they link with the present. And then, which is what people really want to know, is the area of what's coming up.
Yes.
When I forward in time. Yeah, and it's not what will happen, but how they can best work with the cycles, knowing when to take a pause so they don't start to get too tired or ill. Because we forget to pause, Lynn. You know, music and dance, there's always pauses. There's conversation. But often we think, oh no, I'll go on that bit longer, what I'm doing. And then if we don't find time for recreation, sooner or later, we'll find time for illness. Yes. And I forget who said that. It's not my quote, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I even love, I have to say, I even love how you pause when you speak, Ysanne, because it lets us process the information you're giving us and it sinks in. And I think many people, when they want to deliver their content, they're just talking, and it just flies past us. And you're really being very deliberate and thoughtful here. And I appreciate that, because I'm drinking it into, I love it. I'd like you to speak a little bit more about how your astrology reading can help us get a sense of what's coming up.
Well, for the astrologer, they move the chart forward in time. Firstly, we look at a book called an ephemeris, which means ephemeral, time moving, and see where the planets are, like for today, but in the months and even years to come. And then there's another way of progressing the chart forward, a kind of more mathematical way. So I use both methods. And either they have questions about, is that a good date for something? Or what will July be like? Or what will it be like when I'm traveling somewhere? Or we're just looking in general at how that client can work back best with their own rhythms, I suppose. And you know, and it can come up like, are you thinking of moving home? Yes, I am actually. When would be a good time? No, I'm not thinking of moving home, but the moon's involved. So maybe they're wanting to make some changes in it. Yes, maybe something with their mother's coming up, with their mother still present on this planet. And times for initiation of things, starting things off. And I had one client who, she lives in New York, and she was one of the top people in a bank, well-known bank. And she really wanted to help people more. And she was thinking of doing this and had a time frame in her mind. And I suggested, and I was surprised myself. I thought, well, you know, why not do it now? But I said, can you possibly wait about 6 to 8 weeks, and something's going to come in, which will make that more accessible to you. That position might be open, or better one than you're going for. And she did, because she had had regular updates with me over the years, and she knew how I worked. And then she wrote to me and said, you know what, that timing was spot on, because that came about the 7th week afterwards, and it was perfect.
Wow.
And really happy doing that job. And
you know, I wanted to delve a little bit more into the astrology part of what you do for businesses, because that's something I think people have never, I certainly never thought about, the timing of the business. So when you work with people, do you typically do a bit of both personal or business, or they let you know? And how can you help people with their business?
Right. It depends if they own their own business. I work with more and more clients who are self-employed. Okay. Or they might even be doing something in the voluntary sector or some project. But so I work more and more with people at the business level. And your business chart, when it's registered, you may not know the time, or a website goes live and that's your business. That moment is your baby. It's your baby, whether you've got children or not. So you've got to nurture it. You've got to look after it. And if they want a date and time for starting a business or launching a website, I say, what is a kind of business? Is it going to involve a lot of people? Is it more one-to-one? Is it more theatrical? Is it about marketing? And then I look at what sort of planets, because each of the planets, Lynn, have particular qualities. Like Jupiter can rule the big public stage and traveling and teaching. Mercury is learning. Venus is the creative arts. And things of that kind. And I want to see which ones would be relevant in what particular areas of the chart, that moment of the birth of the business. So you look, and also the rising sign for it, that particular time for it. What is the face of it? What does it look like, your business? And then I would look at the cycles of it over the years. Like I've done my work 41 years, but some people have just started. But whichever the case, you can look at the cycles coming up and cooperate with it. Know when it's time to have maybe a relaunch or a change of name of the company, going into a new partnership, when to have a bit of a sabbatical from it, all those things.
So this is, I think everyone should realize this is not like just having, well, you're giving people an intuitive reading as well as the astrology reading. It's not like you just are making it up. You're doing very mathematical charting with every planet. So every planet, I love what you're saying. I'd like you to go into a little more detail that every planet has a specific characteristic or trait.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So could you tell us a little bit more? Because I'm sure people after, or maybe while watching this, are thinking in their mind, well, I'm this birth sign. What, we have 9 planets. 9 planets, right? So can you just tell us a little bit about the energy of each of these planets?
Surely. The ancients called the planets the gods. Each body, if you like, was ensouled by a god. Like we talk about Mother Earth or Gaia. It's no difference really. And they saw those planets as being spiritual beings, if you like. And the word planets mean wanderers. So the planets wander, if you like, yes, in their movements. And our ancestors really looked up to the heavens and saw pictures and patterns in the constellations.
Oh, that's true, right.
And that's where we get our mythologies from, particularly the Greek ones, which we're more perhaps familiar with. There's many others, the Nordic, and the Egyptian and Aztec and so forth. And what we now call the gods or stories, we could call archetypes, that each of the planets have a psychological meaning. And you have about 9 or more. Pluto's been demoted to a dwarf planet. I know it's funny really, isn't it? But he doesn't care because it's a very powerful planet. And when a planet is discovered, it tends to reflect events on Earth. Like when Pluto was discovered in 1930, you had the rise of dictatorships, and Pluto in mythology was a god of the underworld, a very powerful being.
Wow.
To death and rebirth and power. So dictators, there's nothing much more powerful in a negative way than dictators. So when Pluto was discovered, you had dictators rising, you had the experiments with the atom, the breaking of the atom bomb, the dropping of the atom bomb, and the rise of psychotherapy, which is the discovery of the inner world, our inner world, okay? When Neptune was discovered in the 1800s, and Neptune is very much about where we open up to source, where we're very sensitive to vibrations and also to chemicals. So people with a tense, shall we call it, difficult aspect at Neptune in their charts can be more prone to addiction, fantasy, perhaps not handling any kind of drugs, even chemical ones, very well. And when it was discovered, we had the rise of anesthetics, gaslighting, hypnosis. It's quite interesting how it all mirrors. So of course, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto are discovered in the last 300 or so years. Before that, there was just the planets up to Saturn. And the moon, I think I mentioned, was to do with our mothering side, what our first 7 years of life was like, what our rhythms are like. And the sign of the zodiac these planets are in modifies or amplifies the meaning of the planet. So the moon, for example, is very happy in the sign of Cancer. It has a sign, if you like, it's sort of associated with. But in perhaps the sign of Capricorn, it feels a bit more uncomfortable with it. So one has to learn how to work with it. Okay. Now, Mercury is about how we think, how we learn. So when I do children's charts, and I do a lot of them, I'm looking at the kind of education. Is that child more analytical, more intuitive, more telepathic, more visual, more practical? That helps a parent a lot. to understand how that child will learn.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of it.
We cover all. So when people are getting a reading from you, you are, I'm going to just paraphrase back, you're really determining the effect of the planets that are touching that person's life at that point in time when they're born, and then moving it forward to where they are currently, right now, right?
Absolutely. You're still going to be your birth chart, or the birth chart is still you, but it's like putting a coloured light in front of another. You get a kind of change of hue, can, change the look of it. And I think when we're born, our souls, maybe getting a bit more serious now, but our souls choose to come into form, into incarnation, quite deliberately, to have the best possible conditions for this lifetime, to be of service, not to forget to enjoy life as well, to help heal our family line. And we choose a historical time period and culture. And when we're here, we may think, oh, I wish I'd chosen something different, but it's still absolutely right for that person, whether we're here a short time or longer time. But we're also here to overcome our tendencies, not to say, oh, I'm afflicted by Saturn, or that's the way I am, but to actually work with it. So it's a wonderful smorgasbord to put many, many things on and to help to understand ourselves. So it has a fantastic link with psychology. It really does.
Yeah, I am a believer in past lives. And I feel that, maybe some of the people listening here are. What is your feeling about past lives and how it might affect us currently? I know we didn't talk about this earlier, but this is our open conversation. So I appreciate your kindness in sharing your thoughts.
That's fine. I can't prove it. We can't prove there's even an afterlife. It's based on belief or trust. And the same thing with reincarnation. I personally feel that it seems a bit unfair if there's a soul, that somebody comes for 2 years and that's it, and another person has 100 years, particularly if it's a very pleasant 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel it makes some sense that there has been a background, and we may well have known our partners, our children, our parents in previous incarnations. Now, it could all be happening now. Our 5 senses and brain make it linear. To be balanced, we have to see things in a linear way, because otherwise we'd just be overloaded.
Right, of course.
We just couldn't handle it, and that's why people do get mental illness and so on. They're too wide open. So we do need to have the reductive valve, if you like, of the brain and 5 senses. Children are much more wide open. But I feel that we bring lessons through from the past. We bring talents through. But they are like overcoats, and we shouldn't get stuck with them. We're here to live now.
I like that. That's so true. Because many of us do focus on past, or they're looking to the future, and they're not living in the present.
Exactly.
And I think that's wonderful. What you do is really help people, I would say, get centered in where they're at right now, based on the past. And then you can look a little bit in the future. And I'd ask you a question too, which I think would be interesting for people to know, is how often do people have readings? I mean, are they just getting one reading, or what would be the best way to work with you if they were to have readings?
Well, some people hire me to have regular readings. Like there's a kind of, when I do with timing, they can have so many sessions to ask about the timing in their lives, particularly for their businesses or daily life, even over a year. I think it's quite good if people can come back fairly regularly, but not to get dependent on me or what I tell them. So some people come and they have a 90-minute session, and some of that information can last a lifetime. They feel totally satisfied with it. Interestingly enough, when they hear the reading back, because it's recorded, they can sometimes get more from it, because listening in the first is they're sort of weighing it up, judging it a little. It's all normal to do that. And when one hears it back at leisure, that's when you start to get answers for, yourself. And so I do suggest to people they come back yearly to have an update, to bring the chart forward, and to look at ongoing issues and questions, and also to look at the months coming up or the next year or so. And sometimes people contact me just because they have something imminent and they want to have some perspective on it.
I love that. So tell us, how can people get connected to you? Because I know you have a blog. Can you tell us your website and how people can learn more?
Sure, thank you. My website is Ysanne, as spelled YSANNE.com, Ysanne.com. And there's a lot about me on there. There's a lot about the different kind of readings. I write articles. I even wrote one about my journey to the South Tibetan Plateau the other year to do some voluntary work, which I think would interest.
Oh, I'd love to. So go to ysanne.com and it's in the blog tab where people can subscribe, right?
And I write a blog, but every 2 months, and about what's going on with the planets. I wrote one about 2 or 3 weeks ago because there's some very important cycles of planets coming up, and it's in everyday words. You don't have to be fazed by the technology, the language of astrology. My job is to make it accessible, to make it simple. And I think sometimes that takes time. And I've certainly had that in my career.
Yeah, really, you've had an interesting career. And I like what our title of our show today, we had talked about it, discover the magic behind your astrology reading. It is like magic. You're interpreting what's going on all around us so we have clarity in our lives now.
Indeed.
You just mentioned you went on an interesting trip to, where was this again?
The South Tibet Plateau, which is not owned by China. And it's the whole Mahayana Buddhist Tibetan culture and all their day-to-day rituals, and is at very high altitudes. And an amazing lady took me in there who does a lot of work for the people. And it was extraordinary. Again, that was one of my purposes in life, to go to Tibet. Anyway, that's slightly
tell us a little bit, just before we conclude, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to go to Tibet. I find that interesting. Not everyone gets that opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, when I was a child, I had a great love of the outdoors, wide open spaces. I found being around fields and trees, which I love now. And that's why I feel reincarnation, past lives, is relevant, because I just felt I was an alien in England, beautiful though it is. And if any of you have been to England, you know it's very pleasant. I lived in a lovely area, but I just love mountains, and I wanted to go to Tibet. And I really feel I had a past lifetime there, sort of sensed it as a child. And then when I knew that China had taken it in 1959, apparently, according to my parents, I was devastated.
Wow.
And I knew that they have done, there's a lot of harm that's been done there and goes on. And a lot of Tibetans have left, and they're all over the world. There's a settlement in New York, settlements all over the world. But I met a lady who had really helped that valley when it was very medieval back in the 90s. And to get in there is over 2 massive passes, and the conditions are very harsh. And she opened up a hospital, a community centre. An extraordinary woman. Her name is Joan Pollock. I'll mention her name. And she's become a good friend. And when an article or journalist said to her, "Why did you do it?" And she said, "It must be the nurse in me," because she'd been a nurse and she wanted to help. And I attended amazing festivals there. The people were lovely. There's a wonderful light, Lynn, that shines from these Tibetan eyes. It's extraordinary. And they haven't left that plateau, that valley.
So you just wanted to go there to experience it? Were you also going to do some work there?
Yeah,
or
we all help in our ways. And I sponsor a little girl from there. She must be 9 or 10 now, and I've taken on her education for 10 years. I pay so much a year, and very, very poor village, my goodness. She's now being educated, and other people educate perhaps a monk, or help the youngsters to go into higher education, because in the end, it's a big earthquake zone. And if China was to take it, then they need to have some kind of education to be able to continue elsewhere.
Would other people, I'm just curious, be able to sponsor a child there? Is there an organization that you're a part of?
There is, yes.
What is the name of that?
Well, there's a website, that's the easiest way to go, in Spiti. It's a Valley of Spiti, SPITI.org, O-R-G. And if they went on the website, they could find a connection with Joan and other ways to do that, yes.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm glad that this story came out, because I think the people listening to, what?
It's close to my heart, because I had 2 ambitions: to have a book published and to go to Tibet. And I did
them both. So now people can get connected to Tibet. What you've just said, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, which hasn't been taken over. And
wow.
Very, very special. Very
Thank
special.
you for sharing that. You know, I was going to say that I think the people who are attracted to this program are difference makers. They're passionate about positive change. So you're
Yes.
giving them good information, not only about themselves, but how to help others.
Yeah.
So before we leave, I wanted to ask you, what's one parting thought you would like people to remember?
Kind of a message, I suppose, that we have a soul. I believe we have a soul which is on a journey, and the contract of our soul, being here on earth, is with space and time, which we experience here on earth in the three-dimensional world, can be seen through our horoscope. And the word horoscope means view of the hour of birth, not the month, a view of the hour. And our bodies come from nature. And I think it is so important, particularly at this time, particularly as we're far more on Zoom and doing techie things, because the world has changed in the last year. To be grounded, to be in nature, to honor the cycles of the planets, to look at them, look up. As a child, I always looked up at the sky when I went outdoors. Just look at those patterns. Follow the rhythms of the moon from new to full. Feel them. You were born at some phase of the moon between new and full, which has its own story. And honor the cycles of the major planets, the giant planets, which are moving very slowly. Because on Monday, we have Jupiter and Saturn, the giant planets, the teachers. We're calling this the Grand Conjunction, and they're coming together the closest in 800 years. And they're going to be seen like one body there because they're just so close. Be very bright. And they're calling it the Star of Bethlehem because it's on the winter solstice on Monday. And I think it's an opportunity for us all to find our sense of community more. What does community mean? How we can be a teacher to ourselves, and how we can bring that knowledge into play, if you like, into work on life itself, into life at this time. And to know we're all one, which is what the word universe means, uni. So that's a message I would like to leave.
Oh my goodness. We are all one. What a beautiful message. This is a time we need to come together. And at the same time, what you've said, which is so beautiful, is that we are all unique.
Yes.
We are here for one at one point. We've chosen this time.
Yes.
And we're connected, just like the stars all connect in the planets.
And the birth chart is unique. It's you. You're unique. And it's a wonderful discovery of going into your inner world, and nothing to be frightened about. It's not about prediction and fate, but you're actually, by changing yourself, by healing yourself, you change your future. That's perhaps even a more important message.
Wow. Let's repeat that. By changing yourself, you're healing your future.
And no, by healing yourself as well.
By healing yourself. Say it again for us, Ysanne.
Okay. By changing oneself, by becoming more authentic and conscious, by healing one's wounds and not being a victim to them, we change how we relate with people, and we change our futures, possible futures.
That makes sense. If we heal ourselves, then we can change our future because we're more whole.
Exactly.
Thank you. You've given us so much to think about and to really appreciate, Ysanne. I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed, gotten to know you, and to share your message with the world. So if everyone is listening wants to learn more, go to Ysanne, YSANNE.com, and connect with Ysanne, and you can sign up for a reading and learn more about her. Thank you, Ysanne, for a great time together. It was wonderful.
And thank you, Lynn. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I've enjoyed every moment.
Likewise. Thank you. All the best to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.